I was just playing back my video about the Pope and Boris Johnson, and got to a place where I mentioned Genghis Khan. And I had a little bit of inspiration to do something slightly different here because whilst things I've been describing so far have been about present-day figures, albeit with Elizabeth II it was unusual in that she appeared as her younger self, and it morphed into a journey through time that she set me through, possibly because it was connected to people who also had a royal connection in the past, like Francis Drake, connected with another Elizabeth. So just as I've had these kind of encounters, sometimes remote views, sometimes more very lucid dreams, more rarely astral projections, true astral projections with living figures in the subtle realms. Time doesn't have the same meaning. So moving through history and through time is the same sort of matter as moving through space. Space isn't, it doesn't, you just shift from one zone to another. It just unfolds as you will it to, as you wish it to, or as it's meant to. It's not linear. But nevertheless, encounters with historical figures, people in the past, are somewhat different. And I think, although it might still stand the principle of seeing through the eyes of another, you might also say there's an element of, you could bring past lives into it perhaps, maybe not necessarily your own, maybe just somebody, you're just tapping into a wavelength of a past life or an era that maybe you've lived through, and that individual is significant. I think sometimes these things, they just blow on the wind, and sometimes they blow into you. At other times, there is a genuinely karmic connection. It's not necessarily always that obvious which it is. I've thought about these distinctions many a time, and I kind of remain open-minded in interpretation. I'm open to sort of thoughts and other people's interpretations as well of this type of thing, because at the end of the day, it's difficult to know for sure, isn't it, unless you get a personal experience of such magnitude that makes such a massive impression upon you that you really, left with in no doubt about what it could be. Anyway, the Genghis Khan encounter was funny, really, because he's not somebody I've ever, I've studied classical Greece, I've studied Christian history, the history of Central America, India. These are places where I would definitely have said I had karmic connections to, but Genghis Khan and Mongolia had never come up as being a thing for me. I'm only really very loosely aware of him, even now. But the fact remains that one night I found myself running absolutely hell for leather, like my pants were on fire, away from somebody who was chasing me, absolutely, a state of red alert, high alarm, running for my life, absolutely, like one of those movies where it's just like an Indiana Jones film where they're just jumping here, there, and everywhere, trying to escape, and this chase goes on. And I was trying to escape this mad, crazy person that was chasing me, and they were chasing me. I was in no doubt they were going to catch me and kill me. Despite this, there was a certain hilarity to it because of the pants on fire, the crazy element of it. Anyway, the upshot was I ran and ran and ran, and there were all kinds of people around and sort of jumping around. And then at a certain point, I just thought, I can't escape. And I stopped dead in my tracks, turned around, and then it was I saw this person who just was Genghis Khan, a few meters away, dressed in the Genghis Khan clothes, really appearing like his spirit form, his legend form, his legacy form. And he stopped, and what was interesting was that even though he was shouting and hollering and chasing me, as soon as I turned and just dropped my sword and just was like, okay, I surrendered, he lowered his weapon, bowed at me, gave a short bow, sharp bow, turned on his heel and walked away, and left me absolutely mystified, none the wiser what it was all about. I did feel like myself. That state of mystification is the hallmark of a karmic experience or a message from the dream world or the astral world. I don't know how else to describe it other than mystification, which is like a moment of lucidity when you sort of go, and something kind of dawns on you that there's a message there, but you don't necessarily know what it is. I mean, I'm sort of eternally clueless in that I know I'm getting a message, but I almost never know what it is. So I get pinged, but when I answer the door, I don't see who's there. Anyway, I just wanted to pick up on that because it did stick in my mind, and if anybody has any thoughts on Genghis Khan, I'd love to hear them. Now, while I'm in the East, I'll relate something else, which was pure astral. So I had this experience at the height of my meditative practice, which I suppose would be my second phase of meditative practice and spiritual, strident spiritual work, which began in 2008. And between 2008 and maybe 14, peaking around perhaps 9, 10, 11, I really did have, I was able to just kind of do what I wanted in terms of astral projection. And even when I didn't will things to happen, they would happen spontaneously. So I can't remember properly now all the exact avenues I was going through, but I was just intensively engaged in all kinds of spiritual studies, Eastern, Western, you name it, and talking to a lot of people about it and benefiting a lot from very knowledgeable masters in certain fields who were inspiring to talk to. Anyway, this particular night, this wasn't something that I willed to happen, but it probably would have been triggered by something that I'd been studying at the time or reading, something that had intrigued me sufficiently, because in those days it only really had to intrigue me sufficiently and there I'd be. And so I would be in myself, so not through the eyes of another, just me, myself, in that state was quite a traveller. Anyway, I became conscious looking up at somebody I described as a red-robed rinpoche. This was a really special experience, an astral experience of this person. So much so that I actually wrote it down and included it in my anthology, The Magi and the Fool. In the section at the beginning about Radio Avalon, when there's a correspondent, I created it into a kind of a story, but this actually did happen. So I'm not sure it was clearly the Far East somewhere, into China, I would say. China or Japan, but I'm thinking China, I think. And I was looking up at this red-robed rinpoche, and I say looking up because he was levitating about sort of 20 feet off the ground. He was the size of a normal man, as far as I could tell. He wasn't looking down. He was intensely in meditation himself, but conscious, not kind of out unconscious. He was conscious, but not looking down at me, standing very straight, but hovering. He had jet black hair, very shiny, thick, long hair that went down his back, just poker straight. And a red robe which covered him from his neck. It had long sleeves. I couldn't see his feet. I wasn't aware of his hands. As far as I can remember, his hands were straight by his side. And I was just looking up at this person, hovering. As I was in an astral state, there's no emotion as such in the astral state because you have left your body, and it's in your body that you have your hormones and your chemicals and all those things that create emotion. So when you leave your body, you're in a you're far more calm and lucid and unaffected by emotion. You can still experience mental fear, or you can your rational mind and self and your will can give you an impression of a situation, whether it's dangerous or so on, but you're not sort of feeling things in the same way. Anyway, I was calm. I was just observing this person, this rinpoche, as I called him. He might have he was high up, of course, and I was sort of directly under him, so I couldn't probably see his face because his chin was slightly tilted upwards. But he may well have had a very thin pencil moustache. For some reason, I have that in my mind when he comes to mind. Just like a very thin, long moustache. Really thin. Almost like it was drawn on. Now, the next thing was I looked at ground level and saw that accompanying him, because they certainly were with him, he may even have been, I don't want to say controlling them, but they were certainly completely unified. Were two Dakini, and whereas he was dressed in the bright red, they were both dressed in bright blue robes. They had the same jet black hair, but in their case, their hair was sort of pinned up in what I suppose I'll have to call a typical Oriental style. And now I'm thinking about it, maybe Japanese style is more like it. I'll look for a picture, perhaps, to try and share with this video, so I can give an idea of the clothes they were wearing. I think they were kimono style type of outfits. And they had this black hair pinned up in their big bonds. Now, unlike him, who was stood very still, albeit he emanated an immense power and energy, as you can imagine, him levitating. And I think there even was a tree nearby, so to sort of give me an idea of the height he was at, and the just emanating power and energy from this stationary position. The Dakini also emanated incredible energy, but they were in motion, and they were so graceful, and it really was like something from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, the way they moved. And I saw immediately that they were gliding and putting on a show. In fact, they were moving on top of water. It wasn't like I was in front of a lake. There was no my whole attention was on the humans or the people, the forms, not the environment around them. But I was aware that their element was water, and they could glide across it, and they were just sort of skating over the top of this water with just this incredible display of elemental mastery that you really had to see to believe. And as I watched this, I sort of developed this longing. Oh, if only I could do this. And I just became absolutely entranced by these two female Dakini and the moves they were making, until I got to this state again of supreme mystification, where when you get to this mystification and the kind of point of this spiritual lesson or the teaching that you're receiving, it carries you to another dimension again within it. And on this occasion, I was transported with these two Dakini to a busy street. It was like it could have been, maybe it was Tokyo, maybe it was Beijing, maybe it was New York. I didn't know. I didn't think about it either. All I could see was that there was fast-moving traffic, really busy, and there was rain, and the road was covered in water, and somehow these Dakini were skating still on the water, as if they were moving through all this traffic, or the traffic wasn't there, or they were in another dimension and the traffic was there, and they were in this subtle realm at the same time. And I watched, and they just skated straight through this traffic on the water towards me, through me, and away. So yeah, that was rather a wonderful thing, and that's why I wanted to share it.